Right. So our final guest this afternoon is Pedro Gomez. He is the head of climate. I like this very succinct title. Head of Climate at the World Economic Forum and a member of the forum's executive committee. So thank you for being here, Pedro. And I want to start by asking you, you work with organizations and companies all over the world, so I want to hopefully get a sense of what you're seeing. And if you could share like an example, I guess, of a successful decarbonization initiative, our focus here is in manufacturing, that you think could serve as a model for other industries or in other places.
Thank you, Alison, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you all here in Davos. Perhaps I'll start by saying a bit of what I see in today's environment. We are living in a world that is different than let's say it was, if you remember Glasgow. Just before the COP, there was perhaps a different sentiment. Now we have a different geopolitical situation, different economic situation. But at the same time, we have a lot of opportunity. Right? So it's a different world, but we need to adapt, and we need to make sure that the actions that we support, the actions that we facilitate, the communities, the coalitions that we curate are cognizant of the different situations that we're facing. Now, you mentioned one successful example, and maybe what I would like to focus is on, perhaps you've heard of the First Movers Coalition. It's a group of companies. We started back in Glasgow. There were 35 of us, 35 companies, one government, and this has quickly evolved. And today there's 105 companies that are participating in this coalition, and they are sending probably the largest demand signal to support the development of emerging decarbonization technologies. We are working on the sectors that are called hard to abate or heavy emitting sectors, depending on who you ask. Aviation, shipping, trucking, steel, aluminum, cement, and concrete. I think this is quite successful, and you heard the numbers, 105 companies. Now they have 125 commitments. But perhaps the most important thing is that in the year 2030, all of these commitments will represent an aggregate demand of $16 billion a year that will be supporting the development of decarbonization technologies. I think that's the match is not over. We still need to push through. Now we have 13 governments that are working with this coalition. And just in the panel before, I heard, what is the role of policymakers? They have a role to play. This is a team sport, so it's not only about the private sector, it's not only about the governments, it's not only about us as end consumers. We all need to be playing together. The issues that we are working on are quickly evolving, they're dynamic, and if we want to solve this in isolation, the reality is that we will not probably make a dent in one of the greatest challenges we're facing.
You mentioned a couple of industries in particular. What do you think are sort of the emerging technologies that you see potentially making a dent in those heavy to abate or hard to abate heavy industries?
Well, there are different technologies, right? So let me take, for example, the example of aviation. In the aviation sector, there is perhaps more consensus of what needs to happen or what is the technology that needs to be evolving the faster. So that it can decarbonize more effectively and it can also create business effectively, and that is sustainable aviation fuels. But there we have a challenge. We need probably, the idea is to have probably 10% of all the aviation fuel to be sustainable aviation fuel by the year 2030, and we are not there yet. So we need all the help we can get in order for that to happen.
Where are we?
Probably we're about 2%. So we need to accelerate, but this applies, I think, in every aspect of decarbonization where we're tackling climate. Nothing requires us to be slower. Everything needs for us to be working together. And again, this is a team sport. We all need to be working together, meeting us where we are. The context is different, and we need to make sure that we have a North Star to follow. But certainly, taking it also, the combination of day by day is also important.
On the train here this morning, I overheard a conversation. It was actually about decarbonization, and there were a couple of people talking, and they were saying, "Oh, that's all well and good if you're a big company. It's great to hear what they're doing, but what about us? How do we do this?" So, how do smaller companies even begin to think about this? Like, how to finance it? What the incentives are?
Well, this is certainly a question that is critical, and it's present in the minds of I think in many of the minds of the global company CEOs. For example, we have this community that we call the Alliance of CEO Climate Leaders, 130 companies that are working on decarbonization. They are probably the most avant-garde companies on this space, but they are clear on one thing. Whatever impact they have is nothing if they don't bring their supply chains, if they don't bring the smaller companies along. So they are working together with them as well. They have that responsibility. They see the opportunity as well. They see that if they want to decarbonize the so-called Scope 3, they need to bring the smaller players along. Sometimes they require more help, sometimes they require less help, but I think it's important to bring them all along in this journey. Supply chains are definitely, and maybe just one final word, they are also not necessarily present in the developed parts of the world. They're also in the developing markets, and we need to make sure that everyone is involved.
I was just going to ask you about that, given your role, but also Katie McGinty was just here and was talking about, she mentioned the $4 trillion gap it's required for climate financing. So I'm curious about the new collective quantified goal that was agreed upon in, November. And sort of how you see that, what role or impact that might have in manufacturing in the near future.
Well, last year was the year of climate finance, and if you remember, COP29 in Baku was labeled the financial COP. And one of the key objectives was to agree on this NCQG, the new collective quantified goal on finance. We reached an agreement as a global society, 300 billion. It's a big number. Nevertheless, it's probably not enough for what we need to do. But I think one of the ways to think about it is that, again, it's not only for the governments to put the money. We need the private sector to also to be part of this, the private or climate finance. So it's not going to be easy, but we need all the private climate, but we need the bankers, we need the investors, but we also need the companies that will be investing to implement this in their own processes.
What other global strategies are needed? And well, let me start there.
Global strategies for
decarbonization of manufacturing in particular, sorry. There's a context.
Well, manufacturing is definitely one of the strategies, but energy transition is probably where we have been focusing a lot of the energy. It's critical that we, as in COP28, one of the outcomes was to transition away from fossil fuels. We need to do that. Energy transition is critical. We need to make sure that it's done at what we call following the energy triangle. Energy transition needs to be sustainable, for sure, but it also needs to create energy security and at the same time needs to promote sustainable development, economic growth as well.
I'm going to ask you a question similar to the one I asked Katie as well, which is sort of, market-driven sustainability. It survived the first Trump presidency, but as you sort of look to the global commitment for the next 4 years, do you think it's resilient enough to survive another?
Well, I think there are some forces that are very difficult to stop. There's also many companies out there that are making fantastic business by going green. Again, going back to the example of the Alliance of CEO Climate Leaders, it's a group that in the past few years, they have managed to reduce their carbon intensity by 12%, their emissions in absolute terms by 10%, and at the same time, they have increased their productivity or growth by 18%. So it can be done. It's not always easy. And I think this is an important message. It's not, this journey is not an easy journey, but very few things that are worth in life are easy doing, right? So we need to concentrate our energy. We need to be all working together. And in many cases, the opportunities are there. In other cases, we need to look for them a bit more thoroughly, but there's opportunities to be climate smart, to be business smart, and cost smart, as one of the CEOs says frequently. You must hear a lot of these conversations, again, all over the place, all over the world, with many different stakeholders. What is not being talked about? What's being left out that is important or being overlooked? I don't know if there's anything that is particularly overlooked. One of the things that I would like to see more, perhaps I will focus on that, is the interplay of the different actors and the interplay of how we need to adapt to every situation, to every partner. It's not the same to discuss this in Europe as it's not the same to discuss this in my home country of Mexico. Mm-hmm. We need to make sure that we're always adapting the discussion so that we identify the opportunities, the incentives that are relevant in each geography. Sometimes we tend, and I'm a culprit of this perhaps, to generalize a bit too much, but I think it's something that I'm trying to remind myself frequently.
We're almost out of time, but you came just at the end here, so I don't know if you caught this, but we tend to ask somebody one fun thing at the end of every segment. I feel really lucky because you're like an insider, so I'm so curious, like what is something that all the insiders in WEF know about Davos and about this week that the rest of us should know?
Well, we know where the best bathrooms are inside the Congress
There we
Center.
go. Okay. So, and
No, listen, no.
I'm not gonna give it up. This might be the.
I'm gonna keep it to the staff.
Yeah, that's fair.
No, listen, this is a fantastic opportunity for us. We take every moment. We see this as an opportunity, but equally as a responsibility. We have the opportunity to speak to so many of you. And yeah, let's hope that we make the most out of this week.
Thank you. Thank you again for being here. Thank you, everyone, for coming this afternoon. There will be events throughout the week, so we hope to see you again. Take care.
Thank you.
Sorry, I can't shake your hand there. Thank you.